Hi guys, welcome back to my favorite channel. Okay, what if you cloud calls between paying text now or later? What if you cloud calls between paying your taxes now, paying the term later, or not paying them at all? Session givers real estate investor this quiz. Exchange or like an exchange allow investor who exchange on property from another to defer the payment of tax on gain the world otherwise be due on the sale of a property. The threat such an exchange as a continuation of the original investment, not a sale, so that none of the gains is recognized for tax purposes. Remember from chapter 1 that if gain is not recognized, then no tax are awarded. There is no limit on the number of times you can complete exchange, so it is possible to defer taxes indefinitely by continually exchange properties. In the chapter, we explain how like-in exchange work and properties tips and strategies for dealing with more complex exchange. This is one of the long chapters in the book, but it will be well worth your time. There is almost nothing else in the tax code that compares to the potential wealth multiplying effect of a like-in exchange. The foundation of like-in exchange, the ability to defer taxable gain by exchange or one property, often called the reduced property for a new property now as the replacement property has been around in one form or another since both. However, the tax federal strategy was rarely used in the early days because they required the exchange to be simulation. In any real estate market, it would be unusual to find two property owners with similarly represented properties willing to sell them at the same time. Not surprisingly, investors were sold the world-building potential of a tax difference exchange began to challenge the simultaneous requirement. A series of core decisions in the lab and at least now collectively is the starkest case created the legal authority for a daily exchange. A daily exchange would allow an investor to close on the old property before funding and closing on the new property. The courts argued with the that if the property owner received funds from the sale, then the transition looked more like a sale and subsequent purchase than an exchange. So it was decided that a third party would need to hold the process from the sale, and the exchange would need to happen within a limited time period. Today, these transitions are now by many names, including exchange tracker, exchange the tax different exchange like an exchange the name we typically use, and taxpayer exchange no matter how it is referred to exchange no matter how it is referred to. Many of our clients have rated fortunes and gave them by using like-in exchange strategies. The nuts and bolts of like-in exchange. The key of recession say no gain or loss shall be records decide on the exchange of property held for productive use in a trade Our business or fair investment if such property is exchanged solely for property of liking, which is to be held either for productive use in a trade or business or for investment. As you can see in figure, exchanges property free profits profits a very different tax threshold than selling a property. Figure like can exchange is shown in simple note, but there are important details to understand. For example, what actually is meant be productive use in a trade or business or for investment. What is property of a liking? What if the exchange properties are not the same value? The answer to many of the most common questions are provided in the following session. Of course, every property and exchange is different too. If you have the specific question, talk to your tax advisor. Advisor. There are six essential requirements that must be met for a transition to quality for all fully tax different exchange. One, the exchange properties must be held for productive use in a trade or business or for investment. Two, the exchange properties must be like in properties of a similar nature or character. Three, the price of the replacement property must be equal to or greater than the price of the reused property. For the taxpayer cannot receive any process or others asset sometimes called, but from the transition this includes actual process and process different received through constructive reserve. 5. Qualified intermediaries must be used to facilitate the transition. 6. The replacement property must be in the period within the daytime limit and closed within the daytime limit in the section. In the section that follow, we take a closer look at each of these requirements. Property used in a trade or business or held or for investment. Whether a property is used in a trade or business or held for investment depends on how you use the property and characteristics it on your tax returns. But real and personal property can qualify for a liking exchange with focus exclusively on real property. However, certain types of personal property also qualify for treatment, including boats, trucks, aircraft, and even cattle. One of the assets why to invest in investment property is to understand what is not clearing property used primarily for personal use, such as a mine home or a possession. Property used primarily for personal use is not an investment. Just because you have your fiction home will appreciate in value does not make it an investment property where the primary Purpose of the property is to be used for personal enjoyment. In addition to property used primarily for personal purpose, property held primarily for sale does not qualify for like-in exchange treatment. An example of property held primarily for sale is property a home builder built primarily for sale to its customer. The tax codes also excluded exchange of stock, bonds, or notes, other securities, or in the indebtedness or interest, partnership interest, and certificates of truths or beneficial interest real estate used in a taxpayer standard or business and held for more than 1 year. It can qualify for a like-in exchange. A typical example of a property that is used in trade or business is building owned for more than 1 year by a physician and used to operate his medical private will. The building might qualify for treatment. Any inventory or property that is held primarily for sale to customer will not qualify. Like-in property is ours as the term like-in sound. It is one of the same various requirements to meet. Like-in simple means property of a similar nature of character, not quality or grade. The exchange of real estate for real estate or personal property for similar personal property is typically an exchange of like-in property. So trading an apartment building for a vacant piece of ground is considered a like-in exchange. This requirement gets more conflicted with personal property, but almost any price of real estate can be exchanged for another price of real estate as long as both properties are held for productive use in a trade or business or for investment purpose. How do I defer all taxes on the exchange? If your goal is to defer all taxable gains on the exchange, you will need to be sure the replacement property has a purchase price that is equal to or greater than the selling price of the requested property. This goal can be satisfied in a number of ways. If there is a single requested property and multiply smaller replacement properties with a collective value equal to the requested property, then all taxable gain could be difference or vice versa. If multiple properties were sold and a single new replacement property was purchased for an equal or greater value, you still might be able to avoid taxable gain. For example, if you exchange an investment property value for two replacement properties with an aggregate purchase price, if you could qualify for a complete tax difference like in exchange. Once or for forage property. This is an exception to the simple liken rule for Freudian property, real property located in the United States and real property located in the United States are not considered liken property. While most investors use liken exchange to purchase properties of higher value, often referred to as trading up, it is possible to use an exchange even if the replacement property is a lower price than the requisite property. This is called trading down. It just means that the reference is taxable. Example: a sum you purchase a property for and it is now worth. You are no exchange is for a replacement property worth. You would only recognize taxable gain of the difference between the value of your requisite property and the value of the replacement property. If you had sold the property outright, you would have had taxable gain of the difference between your sale price and your basis. Your potential tax savings could be more. The point here is that to totally prefer taxable gain at the time of the exchange, you must purchase a property with an equal or higher price than the property being sold. If you do not, the IRL will take the position that the $5 taken out of the exchange for replacement capitalist gain or recapture of the version, and you will be fully taxed on the difference. That is why most people use in exchange to trade off in value. How do I avoid the saving taxable both? Remember from our discussion of the foundation of in exchange that the course and agreed that for a daily exchange to qualify for tax deferral, the exchangers cannot receive any funds or other property from the sale of the requisite property before he receives the in replacement property. There's rules is so critical that any receive of both, whether actual or constructive, before receipt of the replacement property may disqualify the entry and their exchange. At the very least, it will disqualify a portion of the sale process that the expired receive, actual or constructive. Receive means that the exchange has a case or control over the funds or process, include actuation in purchase price. Actuation can be included in the purchase price of the replacement property. This includes closing fees, inspection fee, loan fees, phone commission, and all other closing costs related to the price. You will hear the term but used to refer to funds or process that the exchange either has access to or control over, but is an old English term meaning something given in addition to. In the case of an exchange, both means the money and fair market value of other property received by the taxpayer. The taxpayer in exchange money includes all cash equivalence, debts, the bills or mortgages of the taxpayer that are either assumed by another party or are liable to wins. The property exchanged by the taxpayers in a subject. Other property is property that is not likened, such as personal property, a promissory note from the buyer, or a promise to perform work on the property. The most common example of both is cash taken away from the exchange, especially in the case of trading down where the sale price of the replacement property is less than that of the requested property. There are many sorts of taxable but other than the net cash received from the exchange below are common examples of non-cash but to be aware of so that you do not inadvertently create taxable gain in a like-in exchange. Debt revocation what occurs when the tax expires. Debt on the replacement property is less than the debt owed on the requisite property like cash bought. Debt revocation what can be avoided by trading up instead of trading down in the exchange, or if you must write down pending qualified expenses to offset the lower price of the replacement property. Using sale process to pay for costs other than qualified closing expense will result in both examples of non-qualified examples include rent proration, utility charges, and tenant damage position deposit transferred to the buyer buying cash to the closing of the replacement property can help avoid the need to use sale forecast for acquisition expense. Browsing more money than is necessary to close on the replacement property will likely result in both taxpayers usually take the position that the loan acquisition costs are paid out of the loan process. However, there is no guidance in this issue, and it is possible the cloud take the position that these costs are being paid with exchange fund. At any rate, it is best to limit browsing to the amount necessary to acquire the replacement property, not surveying the value of any non-like-in property received in the exchange while the strategy is both. It is best to avoid saving non-like-in property. The exchange agreement In order for a qualified intermediary to meet the safe harbor requirement, there must be a written agreement between the exemplar, the expirer, and the intermediary expressly limiting the expirer's right to receive, flag, draw, or otherwise obtain the benefits of money or other property held by the qualified intermediary. What is a qualified intermediary? A qualified intermediary, also known as an accommodator, is an individual or entity that satisfies the safe harbor requirement of the rules and regulation and can legally hold funds to facilitate and like an exchange, since using a qualified intermediary creates a safe harbor or legal presumption that the taxpayer is not actually or constructively receive broadcast virtually all like in exchange today in all fee a qualified intermediary. The key is to hear the qualified intermediary before you close on the sale of the requested property. Once you close and receive funds, it is too late to decide to do a like-in exchange. Besides creating a safe harbor, using a qualified intermediary streamlines the exchange process and allows the taxpayer to focus on closing the right to submit property. The qualified intermediary will process all of the necessary document hold the funds and coordinate the exchange, including acquiring and transferring title to the properties involved in the exchange, given the lost cost of hiring a qualified intermediary. There really is not a good reason to not use one. The resisting certain person from acting as qualified intermediary is basically a qualified intermediary cannot be related to the expirer or have had a financial relationship with the taxpayer in the 2 years before the taxpayer requested the property. Hence, the taxpayer cannot use her children attorney, certified public accountant, or real estate agent. In addition, corporation or other legal entities when owned by disqualified individuals cannot be used as qualified intermediaries. Not many states require qualified intermediaries to be licensed, and there are no federal standards. You need to cause careful. It is best to use well-known intermediaries who have a lot of experience with like-in exchange and strong financial statement. It also makes sense to check that the qualified intermediary you cause in bandit and ensure against error and omissions and employ this disowns the exchange with related parties. Be careful with like-in exchange between related parties. Does not like related parties as qualified intermediaries or exchange in like-in exchange. They defines related parties as you and a member of your family, spouse, brother, sister, friend, child. Related parties also include you and corporation or partnership in when you own more than percent of the ownership, interested capital, interested over profits if you do a like-in exchange with a related party and either of you dispose of the exchange property within 2 years. The exchange will be disallowed and the tax on the original exchange will be treated as of the exchange There are two critical time limits for alike in exchange: Earth Day identification period and the exchange period. The identification period covers the time you have to identify replacement properties, and the exchange period covers the time you have to close on the purchase of this replacement. Replacement properties, and the exchange period covers the time you have to close on the purchase of replacement property. The does not grant extension. On this time limit, it is very important to understand the rules and the count and the recount the days. Flowing is an expression of the timing verbatim from the federal regulation. The identification period begins on the date the taxpayer transfer the relinquished property and ends at midnight on the day. The exchange period begins on the date the expirer transfer the requested property and ends at midnight on the early of the day. Thereafter, or the due date, including extension for the taxpayer's return of the tax imposed by Chapter 1 of Subtitle A of the Code for the taxable year in which the transfer of the requested property count. Need more time, heavy valley. Before you officially put the requested property on the market, you have begun thinking about investment property. However, if you are having the visually required locating the investment property or the requested property sale faster than expected 3-2 nation that a longer escrow period in the sale contract to give you more time to find a educated replacement property. The issue serious about this time limits that they will not give you an extra day even if a deadline falls on Thanksgiving, Christmas or New Year's Day. What if your identified replacement properties is destroyed by fire of some other act of good after the expiration of the 45-day identification period? Sorry, you will not be given an action to identify another property even mistakes cannot be corrected. For example, mixedly using the wrong address to identify a property that we mentioned that there were on expectation. Despite strict enforcement of the time limitation in a transition, there is some flexibility for identifying replacement properties. You are allowed to identify more than one replacement property. This gave you a little more time to perform the financial analysis need to make a good investment decision, and it gives you option if something happens to take one of the properties of the market regardless of the number of requested properties transferred as part of the like-kind exchange. The maximum number of replacement properties you can identify is controlled by two rules: the three property rules and the freshman rule. Their property rule and their properties regardless of their fair market values. Version rule any number of properties as long as their aggregated fair market values as of the end of the identification period does not exceed percent of the aggregate fair market value of all the requested properties as of the date the requested properties were transferred by the taxpayer. What happens if you identify more replacement properties than permitted by the tier property rule and the present rule? The will treat you as not having identified any replacement properties, and you will not be able to complete the linked exchange. The regulation for some relief from this strict intervention, and they will consider a satisfactory identification to be made with respect to any replacement property received be the taxpayer before the end of the identification period, and any replacement property identification before the end of the identification period and received before the end of the exchange period, but only if the taxpayer received before the end of the exchange period identified replacement property the fair market values of which is a less version of the aggregate fair market values of all identified replacement properties. The version rule. It is surprising how often these alternative methods of identifying replacement property come up in practice. Clearly, the simplest route is no identify the replacement properties. If you cannot follow the property rules, seek an attorney or accountant or talk to your qualified intermediary to help you comply with these alternative rules. Once you located the replacement properties and figure out the timing you need to formally identify the property. Yet another benefit of using a qualified intermediary is that this person will have a firm to use for replacement property identification. The key is to provide enough information to adequately identify the particular property, a street address, legal description, or contrary parcel number shall work. However, a street address for a building with 100 condominiums is not specific. No keyword also need to identify the virtual unit. Special circumstances. The basic strategy with likened exchange is not too difficult to understand. Instead of selling a property and paying the tax or purchasing another one, exchange your property for a likened property of actual or greatest value so that your fund kept working for you and not this US treasure as you exchange properties. However, you will likely come across unique station. We detail some of the most common unique station in the following session. Combine likened exchange with installment sale. Sometimes it makes sense to combine tax strategies. One example that can work well is combining a likened exchange with an installment sale. For more on installment sale as Chapter 6. By combining the two strategies, you can step down to a small investment property and shall the diverse taxable gains. You can also diversify your investment between real estate and holding a promissory note in chapter 6. We discuss the impact of combining these two strategies on the treatment of the installment. As part of the transition, there can be some tricky issues that pop up when combining these two strategies, depending on whether the properties are mortgaged and the timing of the exchange. Specifically, combining these strategies will require consultation with your tax advisor. Investment property or primary residence. In chapter 5, we discuss how the primary residence acquisition exempts the price of taxable gain for an individual and for a married couple on the sale of their primary residence. Imagine the tax saving possibilities of different tax with like gain exchange and then limiting the taxable gain altogether by converting the property to a personal residence and qualifying for the primary residence acquisition. When you sell, this is possible. However, current rules make it more difficult. The current rule requires a taxpayer to hold the investment property for at least 5 years and use it as an investment property for part of the time. Then the taxpayer still must use the property as his main residence for at least 2 more years before selling it. Do not forget about receiver of depreciation. When the investment property is a rental, do not forget to feature receiver of depreciation into your financial analysis. Will the rental might be converted to a primary residence and avoid capital gains tax treatment? You cannot avoid taxes due as a result of received during any depreciation taken on the property when it was an investment. Example: various alike in exchange to treat a 4-unit apartment building on which his is of taxable gain for a single-family home. Displacement property that is planned to rent for cash flow and appreciation by using alike and exchange how he avoids paying in tax, assuming a percent rate. He rents the property for 5 years. After the last express, he decides the would like to move his family into the house and use it as their primary residence. Barry live in the house for 2 years and decided to sell it. The house is now worth, assuming his base in the property at the time of the sales is style, but he will have a gain. However, he will likely owe nothing in tax because he and his wife not qualify for the primary resident acquisition. Not a bad result. The logs at the exam expires. Intends in this type of situation to determine whether the property is held for investment. Specifically, what was the expired instant at the time of the exchange? Was it investment or was it to eventually move into the property as a primary residence? If the determined very intense at the time of acquiring the replacement property with to use it as a primary residence, his like in exchange will likely be disqualified. A red flag to the is a relatively short time period during which a replacement property is rented and the time the taxpayer paying begins to use the property as his primary residence if Barry has documentation that he wishes unleashing the replacement property for investment for purpose. The would be helpful to establish his intent. The replacement property was purchased and purchase is investment, not a primary residence. The bottom line is that it is possible for a property to qualify for a like-in exchange and the primary residence exemption. However, this is a touch R and you should work with your tax advisor if you plan to implement this. Waduh. Implement this strategy. On the flip side, there are times when it might be best to change your use of a property to qualify it as property held for use in a trade or business or for investment purpose. In order to qualify it for treatment, this use often arises when a person decides to sell a physician property. The question is whether you have been using the property for personal use or as an investment. If you rented your property for more than 14 days during the year at the paid rental rate and used it personally for less than the grade of 18 days or 10% of the number of days during the year it was rented at a fair rental rate, it is likely an investment. Otherwise, it is probably not an investment. And if you report rental income and education rental expense for the property on your tax return, it looks like you are holding the property for investment for views. On the other hand, if you claim and second home mortgage the education for the property, then it looks more like a vacation home held for personal use. Remember, this will look at all the facts and circumstances, including your treatment of the property on previous tax returns to recertize the property for a like-in exchange. You may need to take action like leasing the home with a rental gain and or online physician rental. Expense. Listing service and treating it as an investment property on your tax return, including the rental income and expense. Keep in mind that the replacement property in a like-in exchange must also be held for investment. So if you are going to exchange one physician property for another, but properties must be held for investment for purpose, and audit will look at your intention at the time you made the exchange. So careful document your investment intents. Remember the mayor of equation that a profit will associate is not enough to classify it as being held for investment when the evidence overwhelming suggests the taxpayer use It is the personal physician treat following are some conservative guidelines for holding investment properties in a fashion or resort area. Qualify your fashion home by treating a property revolves the whole health for personal use. Like a fashion home is an investment property for at least 2 years. You can potentially qualify the property for a like in exchange personal use incidental generally less than the grade of 15 days per year or less than 10% of the time rented at fair market value rate or attempt to rent the property for 2 years. Did you mortgage interest as an investment interest expense, not a home? Mortgage interest expense take all possible tax benefit associated with investment property, including decision for maintenance expense, include rental income on your tax return. Reverse exchange in a typical like in exchange the taxpayer requested the old property and then goes about trying to identify or investment property there are times when the sequence of events will not work out. You will need to reverse the sequence. Thankfully in this things you might be able to complete a reverse exchange as the name indicates. It is just the option of a forward exchange. The taxpayer acquires the replacement property prior to transferring the relinquished property. Reverse exchanges are considerably more sophisticated, complex, and expensive than a typical deferred exchange. However, there are situations where doing a reverse exchange is worth the time and expense, including the transfer of the requested property is daily or otherwise. Apart the taxpayer indication in the fees is stable good deal on a replacement property and must move quickly. The taxpayer chose to search and find the perfect property and arrange for its purchase period to transferring the relinquished property. The taxpayer desires to buy the replacement property. The step of value to switch exchange, whether typical or reverse, can be raised due to potential construction deals. Reverse change are expensive. Careful planning needs to fresh use of a reverse exchange. Given the newness and the formalities involved, the cost can be high. Unlike a traditional like and exchange when normally cost between the cost of a reverse exchange can be around. Reverse exchange are fairly new. The outreach to complete a reverse exchange come from September reference publication the address with some parking arrangements and specifically allowed reverse exchange under certain circumstances. A parking arrangement or choose when the taxpayer arranges with a friendly party to buy and hold the desired replacement property while the taxpayer sells the requested property. Owns the requested property is sold, the exchange is complete by the taxpayer acquiring replacement property from the finance party prevent for producer. Created new terminology and formal rules for this friendly parking arrangement. The person buying and holding the replacement property is called the exchange. Accommodation title hold the relationship between the eight And the taxpayer exchange in formalized in a qualified exchange accommodation arrangement. And it is usually just the qualified intermediary yourself. And a qualified exchange accommodation arrangement is simply a written agreement between the taxpayer and the ad setting out the requirements specified in the fiduciary. The must meet a number of requirements, including title to the investment property must be held by someone other than the taxpayer or a disqualified person, and the cabinet time period that the properties are held in the cannot exceed days. Co-ownership and partnership challenge. Investment real estate is commonly owned by co-owners. Sometimes it stands in common and something is a friendship or limited liability company. Tenants in common interest does not pose a problem for like an exchange eligible of managed correctly. See chapter A for more about like an exchange and tenant incoming interest. However, a partnership interest cannot be exchanged in a transaction, and limited liability companies are commonly treated as partnership for federal tax purposes. If the partnership desires to complete like an exchange by selling a property and taking title to the replacement property in the name of the partnership, there would not be a problem. Frequently, however, the partners might want to discontinue the partnership, sell the property, and go their personal ways fast way. This situation presents a challenge and requires careful planning, and even then it is not without take risks. Generally, the partnership must distribute the tenant in common interest to the partners. Then the farmer partners must hold the tenant in common interest for some period of time before a gain in a transition. And set severely the helpful requirement of like in exchange. This strategy is helpful when one or more partners want to all out of the partnership but the remaining partners wish. To engage in a like can exchange. In this case, only the fighting partners will decide the distribution of tenants in common interest. This strategy is some risk because to our knowledge is not profit any guidelines for how long the tenants in common interest must be held after being distributed before the qualify for alike in exchange. The general rules is that no gain or loss shall be recorded recognized on the exchange of property held for productive use in a trade or business or for investment if such property is exchanged solely for property of liking that is to be held either for productive use in a trade or business or for investment. Here are a few final notes. To close this chapter in a different like in exchange the taxpayer sales process or safe and held by equally fit intermediary. The value to value avoid paying tax on the exchange, the freshman property must be equal to or of great value than the requested property. The two critical time restriction that the taxpayer must identify the possible replacement property within 45 days of the closing and buy the replacement property within day of the closing. You can identify any day replacement properties regardless of you or any number of properties as long as the agreed fair market value is not more than percent of the aggregate fair market value of the requested property. There are restrictions on like in exchange between family members. Any purchase or other property received at the closing of the replacement property will be taxable both. Taxable both can include reduction of the it is possible to convert investment property acquired in a like in exchange into a primary residence and take advantage of the primary residence exclusion. It is also possible to convert a fiction home use family for personal use into an investment property for the purpose of a like in exchange. A reverse exchange enables a real estate investor to contract a like in exchange when the replacement property is identified before the replacement property is closed. Partnership enters limited liability interest and other securities are not eligible for like in exchange treatment to enable individual owners to in a like in exchange distributed property out of the entity and hold it is tenants in common, the tax deferral and potential tax elimination that can be achieved when you follow the like in exchange rules, grateful and trade-off and trade up to higher value properties can create more wealth in a few short years than money slide. It is the personal vacation retreat, flowing or some conservative guidelines for holding investment properties in a vacation or resort area. Qualify your vacation home by treating a property previously held for personal use like a vacation home as an investment property for at least 2 years. You can potentially qualify the property for a like in exchange personal use in incidental generally less than the greater of 15 days per year or less than 10% of the time rent at fair market value rent or attempt to rent the property for 2 years. Direct mortgage interest is an investment interest expense, not a home. Mortgage interest expense. Take all possible take benefits associated with investment property, including the education for many tenants, and included in income on your tax return refers to exchange in a typical like-in exchange. The taxpayer requested the old property and then goes about referring to individual investment property. There are times when this request of event will not work out and you will need to reverse the sequence. Thankfully, in this case, you might be able to complete a reverse exchange as the name indicates. It is just the offset of a forward exchange. The taxpayer requested the replacement. Property barrier to transferring. Property barrier to transferring the requested property reverse exchange are considerably more sophisticated, complex, and expensive than a typical reverse exchange. However, there are situations where doing a reverse exchange is worth the time and expense, including the transfer of the requested property is dilute or otherwise files apart. The taxpayer identifies an irreversible good deal on a replacement property and must move quickly. The taxpayer calls to search and find the perfect property and arrange for its transfer prior to transferring the religion's property. The taxpayer decides to buy the replacement property. This type of build-to-suit exchange, whether typical or reverse, can be raised due to potential construction delays. Reverse exchanges are expensive. Careful planning needs to precede use of a reverse exchange, given the nuance and the formalities involved. The cost can be high. Unlike a traditional like-in exchange, which normally costs between the cost of a reverse exchange can be around. Reverse exchanges are fairly new. The authority to complete a reverse exchange comes from a September reverse producer that addressed what some call working arrangements and specifically allow reverse exchange under the curtain care maintains a working arrangement. However, when the taxpayer arranges with a friendly party to buy and hold the desired replacement property while the taxpayer sells the education property. Once the education property is sold, the exchange is completed by the taxpayer acquiring the replacement property from the friendly party. Revenue producer created new terminology and formal rules for this friendly parking arrangement. The person buying and holding the replacement property is called the exchange accommodation title holder. The relationship between the aid and the taxpayer exchange is formalized in a qualified exchange accommodation arrangement. And it is usually just the qualified intermediary you sell and a qualified exchange accommodation arrangement in simple return agreement between the taxpayer and the age setting. Other requirements specified in refund variation. The months with a number of requirements including title to replacement property must be held by someone other the taxpayer or a displaced person and the combined time period that the properties are held in the cannot exceed the co-ownership and partnership challenge. Investment real estate is commonly owned by co-owners, sometimes as tenants in common and sometimes in a proper partnership or limited liability company. Tenants in common interest does not pose a problem for like in exchange activity if managed correctly. Chapter 8 from more about Leakin exchange and tenant in common interest, however, a partnership interest cannot be exchanged in a transition at limited liability companies are commonly treated as partnership for federal taxpayer if the partnership decides to conflict alike in exchange by selling property and taking title to replacement property in the name of the partnership. There would not be a problem. Frequently, however, the partners may want to discussion the partnership, sell the property, and go theirs right ways. The situation presents a challenge. A challenge and requires careful planning and even then it is not working. That risk generally the partnership must distribute the tenant in common interested to the partners. Then the former partners must hold the tenant in common interest for some period of time before again engine in a transition to selfly the helpful requirement of a like-in exchange. This strategy is helpful when owner or more partners one out of the partnership, but the remaining partner wise to engage in a like-in exchange. In the case only the diverting partners work to save the distribution of tenant in common interest. This strategy has some risk because to our knowledge he is not profit any goods and for how long the tenant in common interest must be held after being in distributed before they qualify for a like in exchange. Tax advisor differs about how long the tenant in common interest must be held before a like in exchange. Some say no significant holding times in necessary. Property prior to transferring the relinquished. Property prior to transferring the relinquished property reverse exchange are considered more specific, complex and expensive than a typical reverse exchange. However, there are situations where doing a reverse exchange is worth the time and expense, including the transfer of the requested properties is the delayed or otherwise fall apart. The taxpayer identifies a irreducible good deal on a freshman property and must move quick. The taxpayer calls the search and find the perfect property and arrange for its purchase prior to transferring the requested property. The taxpayer desires to violate the replacement property. This type of violate to sweet exchange, whether typical or reverse, can be raised due to potential construction delays. Reverse exchange are expensive. Careful planning needs to precede use of a reverse exchange given the news and the formalities involved with the cost can be unlike a traditional like an exchange with normally cost between. The cost of a reverse exchange can be around. Reverse exchange are fairly new. The authority to complete a reverse exchange comes from a September review. The venue procedure, the address where what some car parking arrangements and specific lowered reverse exchange under certain circumstances. A parking arrangement occurs when the taxpayer arranges with a friendly party to buy and hold the desired replacement property while the taxpayer sells the requested property. Once the requested property is sold, the exchange is completed by the taxpayer requesting the requested property from the friendly party. Revenue procedure created new terminology and formal rules for this friendly parking arrangement. The person buying and holding the replacement property is called the exchange. Accommodation title holder. The relationship between the aid and the taxpayer exchange is formalized in a qualified exchange accommodation argument, and it is usually just the qualified intermediary used like an qualified exchange accommodation argument is simple a written argument between the taxpayer and the aid setting out the requirements specified in revenue producer. The must meet a number of requirements, including title to the replacement property must be held by someone other than the taxpayer or a disqualified person, and the convenient time period that the properties are held in the cannot exceed day. Ownership and partnership challenge. Investment real estate is commonly owned by cornwares, sometimes as tenants in common and sometimes in a partnership on limited liability company. Tenants in common interest thus not pose a problem for like an exchange activity if managed correctly. See Chapter 8 for more about like an exchange and tenant in common interest. However, a partnership interest cannot be exchanged in a transition, and limited liability companies are commonly treated as partnership for federal tax purposes. If the partnership desires to complete a like an exchange by selling a property and taking title to the replacement property in the name of the partnership, there will not be a problem. Frequently, however, the partners might want to discontinue the partnership, sell the property, and go their respective ways. This situation presents a challenge and requires careful planning, and even then it is not without take risks. Generally, the partnership must distribute the deed tenant in common interest to the partners. Then the farmer partners must hold the tenant in common interest for some period of time before gaining in a transition to satisfy the health for requirement of like in exchange. This strategy is helpful when one or more partners want out of the partnership, but the remaining partner wills to engage in a like like-in exchange. In this case, only the departing partners will receive the distribution of tenant in common interest. This strategy has some risk because the two are knowledge has not provided any guidelines for how long the tenant in common interest must be held after being distributed before they qualify for a like-in exchange. Take the feature defined about how long the tenants in common interest must be held before a like-in exchange. Some say no significant holding time is necessarily when not to use a like-in exchange. It might be hard law to believe, but there are times when a like-in exchange might not make sense, even if you have a replacement property. One of those times maybe when you have a loss. A like-in exchange will the first loss just as it will the first taxable gain. If you will ensure a loss on our property and can use it to offset other gain income, then it will likely make more sense to just sell the property and take this loss. Closing note: unlike in exchange, a like-in exchange allows as a real estate investor to defer the payment of tax. This is turn allows the investor to keep and revision out where taxable profit wins result in accelerated wealth accumulation. The general rule is that no gain or loss will be recognized on the exchange of property held for productive use in a trader or trade-off business for investment. If such property is exchanged closely for property of like-in, that is so be held as either for productive use in a trader of business or for investment. Here are a few final notes to close this chapter. In a deferred like-in exchange, the taxpayer's sales process are saved and held by equal feet. Intermediary fee to fall and fall paying tax on the exchange. The placement property must be equal to or of greater value than the requisite property. The two critical time restriction are that the taxpayer must identify the possible replacement properties within 45 days of the closing, and by the replacement property within day of the closing. Day of the closing, you can identify three replacement properties legends of value or any number of properties as long as the aggregate fair market values is not more than % of the aggregate fair market value of the acquisition property. There are the restriction or like-in exchange between family members. Any present or other property received that the closing of the replacement property will be taxable. Both can include reduction of debt. It is possible to convert an investment property acquired in a like-in exchange into a primary residence and take advantage of the primary residence exclusion. It is also possible to convert a fiction home-use family for personal use into an investment property for the purpose of a like-in exchange. Reverse exchange enables a real estate investor to complete a like-in exchange when the replacement property is individuated before the replacement property is closed. Partnership interest, limited liability interest, and other securities are not eligible for like-in exchange treatment. To enable employee owners to engage in a like-in exchange, distribute their property out of the NC and hold it as tenants in common. Until here first for today. See you in the next video.